Jimmy Kimmel opened the segment with a grin, expecting laughs, but Jasmine Crockett's calm, cutting response left him silent, and the entire audience stunned. The cameras were already rolling when Jasmine stepped onto the stage. No hesitation in her stride. Black heels, emerald green blazer, tight coils twisted into a bun that didn't budge. She shook Jimmy's hand with grace, smiled politely, and took her seat across from him. The crowd clapped with that familiar late night rhythm, half excitement, half routine. Jimmy leaned back, that mischievous smirk on his face. The one he saved for politicians. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, everybody, he said. The firecracker from Dallas, or should I say the one-woman filibuster machine? Jasmine gave a small laugh, polite but practiced. Clearly she'd heard that one before. "You can call me Jasmine," she said, voice warm and smooth like syrup on toast. "But I'm nobody's firecracker. A few laughs, but not the carefree kind. More like the kind people let out when they're not sure if the joke is on them." The interview rolled on, light and breezy. Jimmy riffed on Congress, political drama, chaos in the Capitol. Jasmine held her own, sharp answers, sharper wit. Then he pulled out a note card and shifted gears. "So, Jasmine," he said, leaning in, "you've got a bit of a reputation for being, spicy, a smirk, a beat. Is that part of the plan, or do you just wake up ready to throw hands?" Scattered chuckles from the audience. Jasmine tilted her head, studying him. Jimmy pressed on. "I mean, sometimes it feels like you're auditioning for a Real Housewives spinoff, The Hill Wives of Capitol Hill." The room laughed harder, but there was a split second of silence before it, the kind that means something's off. Jasmine didn't laugh. She reached for her water, took a sip, set it down. "I'll answer that," she said. "But let me ask you something first." Jimmy raised an eyebrow. "Do you ever get tired of white men calling you spicy just because you don't let them talk over you?" The room fell silent. Not awkward silence, not bad joke silence. The real kind. The kind where something just shifted. A few people let out a low, ooh, the sound of a wound being named. Jimmy blinked. No comeback. Jasmine didn't flinch. She just looked at him, calm, steady, unbothered. The air wasn't tense, it was alert. Every person in the room, even the ones scrolling through their phones, was now watching. Jimmy laughed nervously. "Okay," he said. "I walked into that one." "No," Jasmine replied. "You ran." The audience didn't laugh the same way after that, and neither did Jimmy. He tapped his note cards against the desk, a nervous habit. Only this time, it looked less like nerves and more like a man realizing he'd lost control of the conversation. "Well," he said, fumbling, "this is already more interesting than the guy we had on who writes fortune cookies." A few polite chuckles. Jasmine sat back, legs crossed, hands folded. She didn't need to say anything. Jimmy tried to recover. "You've been very vocal. Some people say bold, others say angry. What would you call it?" Jasmine looked him dead in the eye. "Truthful." He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The crowd shifted. No drama, just realization. This wasn't a segment anymore. It was a moment. "Well, sure," Jimmy said, laughing a little too hard. "Truthful is good, but you've had some heated moments, right?" "You ever ask Senator Kennedy that?" She shot back. "Or is being heated only a problem when it's a woman?" Another blink, another crack in the smile. "I think we have a clip." "No," Jasmine said, interrupting him. "Don't play a clip of me unless you're playing clips of everyone else losing their temper. Otherwise, you're not showing the truth. You're selling a version," the crowd murmured. One person clapped, then stopped when no one joined in. Jimmy cleared his throat. "Look, Jasmine, I wasn't trying to—" "I know," she said, voice softer now. "But you are. That's the thing. It's baked into how all this works. I come here as me, unfiltered, real. And the first word I get is spicy. Jimmy looked like he wanted to respond. But Jasmine leaned forward, just enough for the camera to lock on her expression. When you say that, what you really mean is, I don't behave like the people you're used to watching on this couch. But maybe that's not my problem. Maybe that's yours. Silence again, but heavier. Even the band didn't fill it. Jimmy looked down and gave a slow, genuine nod. Fair enough, he said. Jasmine leaned back. That's all I wanted. For a beat, everything froze. No punchlines, no applause signs, just raw silence. Jimmy forced a smile. All right, he said, trying to pivot. Let's talk about something lighter. You brought your dog, right? I heard he peed on Capitol property and made headlines. Laughter cracked through the room like a pressure valve. Jasmine smirked. He's got better instincts than some of my colleagues. This time the audience laughed for real. Not because they were told to. Because they needed it. But the mood hadn't fully reset. Jimmy was back to jokes, but his rhythm was off, and he knew it. Jasmine, though. She looked like she'd been born in that chair. Unshaken. Grounded. So, Jimmy said, shuffling the next card. We've talked politics. You've checked me a few times. I'm still recovering. But what about your future? Congresswoman today? Senate tomorrow? White House? Netflix special? The last bit was a joke. It landed awkwardly. Jasmine chuckled, but there was an edge behind it. Funny thing about the future, she said. Everyone thinks they know yours better than you do. Jimmy tilted his head. Meaning? Meaning every time I sit in a space like this, someone tries to write my story before I've finished a sentence. People love skipping to the ending, especially when it's someone like me. Someone like you? Black, woman, loud when I need to be, quiet when it makes them uncomfortable, smart enough to make them feel like they have to prove something. Another hush. Not forced, just honest. Jimmy tried again. You've had a few viral moments. That oversight committee clip, the press conference in Dallas. Do you want to be seen as someone who claps back? Jasmine leaned in, ready to land it. Jimmy, when you grow up being told you have to be twice as good and still get labeled twice as difficult, you learn to pick your words. So if one sentence makes it through the noise, it's not about going viral, it's about being heard. The line dropped like a gavel. Jimmy's eyes widened, not in protest, but in understanding. Real understanding. The audience didn't clap right away. They didn't need to. They were just watching her, not with awe, with respect. I'm not trying to be anyone's meme, Jasmine added. But if one sentence can make people stop, even for a second, then maybe that's exactly what needed to be said. Jimmy didn't speak. He flipped his note card face down. Well, he said finally, voice low. You said it. A beat. Then a single clap. Then a few more. Then the whole room caught fire with applause. Jimmy turned to the camera. We'll be right back, he said. And this time, he wasn't smiling for show. The screen faded to commercial. Behind the scenes, no one moved. The crew whispered. A producer gestured for a headset. Jimmy sat motionless. Jasmine sipped her water, poised, unshaken. She hadn't just shifted the energy. She flipped the whole room. And what came next? That wouldn't just echo through the studio. It was about to resonate far beyond. Jasmine didn't miss a beat. I didn't come here to play nice. That line got a real laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was honest. And when something that honest hits on television, the reaction is never just about the joke. It's about the release. Jimmy nodded. Fair enough. I'll say this, I might not agree with everything you say, but I definitely wouldn't want to debate you without a lifeline and 3 assistants. The crowd roared. Jasmine even laughed, really laughed. The first full laugh she'd given. since the interview began. It broke the leftover tension in the room. They spent the next few minutes discussing safer ground, her community work, her Dallas district, the bill she was pushing to expand mental health resources in underserved neighborhoods. It wasn't fluff, but it was the kind of content that got clipped for social media without getting anyone fired. Still, you could feel it. Beneath every sentence, a ripple. Everyone in the room kept circling back to that earlier exchange. You couldn't unhear it. You couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. Near the end of the interview, Jimmy reached for something rare, genuine appreciation. "Look, Jasmine," he said, "no matter what people think of politics, one thing's clear. You're not afraid to be exactly who you are, and I respect that, even if it scares me a little." Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "Growth starts at discomfort," he chuckled. "I'll be quoting that for a week." As they stood to shake hands goodbye, something surprising happened. The audience stood. Not a planned ovation, no cue, no sign from the stage manager. They rose one by one. Some clapped, a few covered their mouths in awe, others recorded on their phones. Jimmy looked thrown. Jasmine seemed almost amused. "Thank y'all," she said into the mic before leaving the stage. The credits rolled over a wide shot of the standing audience. The band started playing, but their music felt quieter, like it didn't want to interrupt whatever had just happened backstage. Behind the curtain, a different kind of chaos rippled. Producers whispered. A makeup artist kept checking her phone, eyes wide. A young staffer whispered, "We're trending already." Jimmy stood near the monitor, watching playback, silent and thoughtful. She asked, "You ever get tired of white? Guys calling you spicy?" He turned to the executive producer. "You think I went too far?" The producer paused, then said, "I think you poked someone who's used to fighting battles, microphone in one hand, dignity in the other." Jimmy sighed. "Yeah, and I was holding cue cards." While Jimmy processed what had happened inside the studio, the outside world was already reacting, fast. By the time Jimmy wrapped up post-show and Jasmine's car left the lot, the internet was on fire. Within 20 minutes, a blurry audience video captioned, "She didn't even raise her voice." Jasmine Crockett just folded Kimmel in real time, had over 300,000 views. Then came the TikToks, dramatic edits, side-by-side reactions. One user, Politico Baddie, posted, "I've watched this 12 times. The way she said, 'Maybe that's not my problem, maybe that's yours, that's gonna live rent-free in my brain forever.'" The comment section exploded. Half the internets cheered. The other half argued. Finally, someone called him out without yelling. "Why invite strong women on your show if you're gonna treat them like caricatures? It was a joke. Get over it." He got what he deserved. The segment hit YouTube by midnight. Not from the official channel, but from a bootleg screen recording someone cleaned up and subtitled. By morning, it was the top trending video across platforms. It wasn't just politics junkies or comedy nerds talking. It had hit group chats, Facebook feeds, and the morning coffee crowd. On The View, Anna Navarro said, "I've been in green rooms with Jasmine Crockett. That woman is not here to play checkers." ESPN's Stephen A. Smith mentioned it on his podcast. Was it a political moment? Maybe. But what I saw was someone take a verbal elbow and send it right back without even getting up from the chair. Local radio stations, from Flagstaff to Bakersfield, talked about it between traffic reports. But not all the attention was positive. Conservative commentators seized on the moment like it was a threat. Another angry Democrat woman throwing a tantrum on live TV. They tried to paint it as unprofessional, disrespectful, out of line. But Jasmine hadn't raised her voice, hadn't called names, hadn't even changed her tone, and that's what made it powerful. She let the words do the lifting. The silence that followed was what people couldn't stop talking about. The way Jimmy didn't know what to say. The way the audience shifted from laughing to thinking. The way the air changed on live television with just a few sentences. By lunchtime, major media outlets were calling her team for comment. CNN, MSNBC, NPR, even 60 Minutes. Her communications. Director, a wiry man named Andre, shook his head as requests piled in. Do we even respond? Someone asked. Jasmine looked up from her phone. We don't need to. Not even a tweet. She smiled. Let them keep talking. I already said what I needed to say. That became its own headline. Jasmine Crockett responds to viral interview. I already said what I needed to say. Support poured in, from corners of the internet that rarely agreed on anything. Young activists praised her clarity. Older voters appreciated her restraint. Even celebrities chimed in. Ava DuVernay called her unshakable. Kerry Washington reposted the clip with a single word: respect. Jimmy Kimmel's camp eventually released a quiet statement. Not an apology, but not a defense either. Just a few lines appreciating Jasmine's candor and the value of honest, tough conversations. Some called it weak. Others called it enough. While the internet buzzed and dissected the moment from every angle, the deeper story was waiting to be told. The story of why that sentence mattered so much. Before the memes, before the headlines, before late-night applause and awkward laughter, there was a girl in East Dallas, sitting at the back of a classroom raising her hand too often. Jasmine Crockett was that kid. The one who always had a question the teacher didn't want to answer. The one labeled difficult when she asked why the school library had outdated books or why no one ever taught about people who looked like her. Her mom worked nights as a nurse at Methodist Dallas Medical Center. Her dad ran a small auto shop that never seemed to close. They didn't have much, but they had enough for Jasmine to feel safe, to feel seen. What they didn't have was time. So Jasmine learned to stand her ground early. Not loud, at least not at first, but precise. If you tried to put her in a box, she'd ask who built it and why. It only had space for one kind of voice. In college at Prairie View A&M, she majored in political science and worked at the campus. Help desk. She spent weekends in debate halls, often facing opponents with more money, polish, and connections. But she had fire. Not the kind that burns out fast, but the kind that sits low and steady, always glowing, never begging to be noticed. Law. School sharpened her edges. Working in public defense exposed her to injustice without hashtags or headlines. She sat across from mothers begging for help in courtrooms that barely pretended to listen. She wrote motions late into the night in a one-bedroom near Duncanville. Every time she spoke in court, someone called her aggressive. Every point she made, they said she was too passionate. Every stand she took came with warnings. She'd go further if she just smiled more. She kept the receipts, not just the words, but how they made her feel. How every label tried to shrink her, flatten her into something dismissible. So when Jimmy Kimmel called her spicy, it wasn't about that moment alone. It was a lifetime of coded language, the same tone from different mouths, years learning to say no. Not this time. That's why her sentence, maybe that's not my problem, maybe that's yours, hit so hard. For so long, the burden was on people like her to adjust, to smooth things over, to understand the context. But Jasmine had reached a point where she wasn't interested in adjusting anymore. She wanted accuracy and grace, knowing you can correct someone without humiliating them. That's why the audience respected her. That's why the clip resonated. It wasn't a gotcha moment or rage. It was control. Control earned from years of watching others tell your story for you. It reminded people, especially women of color, that you don't have to perform softness to deserve respect. You don't have to water down your words to make others comfortable. You can be clear, you can be calm, and you can still shift a room with a sentence. Andre, her communications guy, said it best in a text that night. She didn't come here.